What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Brian Costa. And today, guys, I have a great episode in store for you guys today. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about the amazing NFL Divisional Round Weekend and all of the incredible storylines that came about from it. So with that being said, I wanted to get a guest on the show that could voice their opinions and really give I'd say emotional response to how they're feeling overall. This is a guest who has been on the show many a times before. I'm glad to have him back on again. So please welcome back onto the show, not just a fan of the Green Bay Packers, but also an owner of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Pat Edwards. Pat, how are you doing, man?
I own Aaron Rodgers' thumb, and that's not a flex anymore.
It really isn't a flex at this point. That was a running joke that we used to have back in the day. It's that obviously you are technically an owner of the Green Bay Packers because it's unlike the New England Patriots where you have a Robert Kraft who owns the entirety of the team. How does the ownership situation in Green Bay work again?
So in New England, Bob Kraft owns the majority of the team. Bob Kraft can do whatever he wants. Either Bob Kraft funds any renovations to the stadium or anything like that, or the taxpayers fund it.
Yes.
In Green Bay, periodically they will have fire sales of shares of the team. They go for about $300. There have been a lot of memes about them lately being worthless. And for the most part, they are. In this particular batch, they're used for renovations of the stadium.
Okay.
But it came about because Green Bay is in the market for a pro sports team.
Mm-hmm.
So to circumvent that, fans will buy shares. There's a cap on how many shares you can buy, so there's no individual owner, to ensure that the team stays in Green Bay, and if any renovations are needed, that they can afford to finance those renovations. And if you ever go to Green Bay, you will understand just how integral that team and that franchise is to the city. They're basically funding the city by buying shares.
So. I was about to say, it does make sense that they put a limit on it, because I was about to say, why doesn't some guy just come in and swoop up, just drop $3 million on you, or just a couple billion too, or just do something like that and then just buy it up. So it actually does make sense that they kind of put a limit on that. And man, that's funny. So you kind of a plaque for that, right?
They send you this certificate. I have a frame now. I own a single share. I think there's something like 300,000 or 400,000 of them. I own a single one. I got it for Christmas. It's a great time.
That's amazing. Well, listen,
I've been nothing but disappointed with my team. There are gonna be a lot of changes in this offseason. I'm gonna have a lot of exit interviews.
Yeah, we actually should have an exit interview with you now, because you are an owner of the team, so we should do that. But Pat, there's obviously a lot of things to talk about across the NFL. We will talk about Aaron Rodgers in just a second, but the first thing I want to talk about is another quarterback who's been kind of neck and neck with Aaron Rodgers this year in the MVP race, and that, of course, is TB12. In my opinion, unequivocally the GOAT. You may have some differences, but Tom Brady just played it was a crazy game against the LA Rams. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were down 27-3. And I mean, listen, we've seen this kind of storybook before, and I was just like, all right. I mean, there were rumors before the game that Tom Brady was non-committal on a return for next year. And I was like, all right, Tom Brady's down 27-3. I guess if he's going to go out and, have a last hurrah, maybe he'll just play some of his greatest hits on the way out. And it started to look like that might just happen. I mean, he rallies back and actually comes back to tie the game at 27, which blew my mind. I didn't think he was actually going to be able to do it, just because in the 28-3 game, I remember there were so many things that obviously went right for the Falcons, but the Patriots, their defense obviously was struggling, but they had struggles of their own, but it seemed like stuff that they were able to remedy it very quick. In this 27-3 comeback, during the comeback, they were having problems. They were still having fumbles, and they were still having, interceptions and different problems like that. They still had a ton of penalties on their defense. And I was like, all right, that's kind of what separates that 2016 Patriots that came back from 28-3 versus this Buccaneers team that came back from 27-3. And I was like, that's going to be the deciding factor. But no, they end up marching back to tie the game at 27, only for Matthew Stafford in the final seconds of the game to have an amazing game-winning drive, throws an absolute bomb to Cooper Kupp, who, honestly made his case for a shot at the end at the shot at the NFL MVP. makes a beautiful catch, and the LA Rams end up going on to win. It was an amazing game to watch, just down the stretch, to see whether Brady was able to lead those guys back. I had a ton of fun with it, and I don't know, it's making me wonder with those reports of him being non-committal. Obviously, it's a tough loss to have, especially with how much effort that you put into leading these guys back. But I want to get your thoughts. Do you think Brady's going to be done at this point?
I'm not sure. With Rodgers and with Brady, I think that both of them have a sour taste in their mouth after this weekend. I think that if they were to make a decision right now, it would be rash. So I think we are going to and should wait to find out what they're going to do. I can see Brady coming back. This season was a disappointment for him. He doesn't seem to have any qualms with the Buccaneers organization. He seems to love Tampa. He seems to love his team. He seems to still be playing winnable football. It seemed that his reason for retiring would be family. And if that's the case, I think he's going to have some conversations. If I were Tom Brady, I would have retired after last season. I mean, you think about, he's got nothing left to prove. All of his fans already think he's the greatest of all time. All of his detractors aren't going to change their mind. No. He went out on top. He's got family. He started in a new city. And why would you push your body that far? You're rich, you're accomplished, you're healthy. Big Ben talked about how before he retired, it was a kind of walking a fine line between, do I want my kids to be able to remember watching me play football, or do I want to be able to remember watching my kids play football? Tom Brady makes Ben Roethlisberger look like a child.
Yeah.
In comparison, the fact that he's still in the league amazes me. I would retire just for that reason. What do you have left to prove?
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think about him, but we'll see. He's going to have some conversation with Giselle and then VA and go from there. I wouldn't put it past him coming back for one more year, but I wouldn't put it past him retiring either.
Yeah, there were a couple of things I was seeing that kind of made it interesting to me. I saw Rick Stroud on Twitter. Apparently, Tom Brady was on his podcast. It's called the Let's Go podcast. Obviously, that's just what Tom Brady would obviously name it. And he came out and he basically ended up saying, he was saying, yeah, I'm gonna have to have some conversations with Giselle. And then he was kind of been sending mixed signals over these past couple of days. And he was saying, yeah, I got to consider some things. I really got to think this through. And obviously, while there probably have been rumblings behind the scenes with him and his wife for years, it's interesting that these things are now becoming public. Whereas, 2-3 years ago, when Brady won Super Bowl 51 at 39 years old, everyone was saying, are you going to walk away? You're going to walk away. You just won 5 rings. That's the most by any quarterback in NFL history. Like, do you want to just hang it up now? And he goes, no way. I'm coming back for more. And it's just like, all right. So he had no inkling of even going away at that point. And he was like, I want to play till 45. I want to play till I suck. And I'm just like, all right. So what is it going to be for this guy? And he has no real, at this point in Tom Brady's career, he's never said die. And he's never said, all right, he's basically said, all right, I'm going to be here forever. But now he's almost just saying, well, what if I wasn't here forever? And he's not saying I'm walking away, but he's just saying, well, what would happen? And he said, he's basically come out and said, all right, football isn't the only thing important in my life anymore. And while we've known that, it's just interesting to see Brady have that realization in public with people. And it really does make me wonder what this next step is going to be. I mean, I've looked at Brady, and for a lot of position players in NFL, I think of guys at like 35, 36 are pondering retirement at that point. When Tom Brady was 35, 36, Pat, we were in middle school. We were 12 years old when he was that age. I mean, we're now 20 to 21 years old in college and almost done with college at this point. And he's still considering trying to run it back for another year. I'm just like, it really is crazy. And at this point, it really makes me wonder, because at this point, anytime it was, Tom Brady in retirement, it's always like, oh no, he's going to try to prove you wrong and get you this next time. And I don't know. It is making me wonder, because I don't know how Tom Brady is going to want to go out. I mean, I don't know if I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to want to do like a Derek Jeter type of round trip thing around the league of saying, oh, I want to go say my goodbyes. I want each team to kind of celebrate me as I go into their stadium and then walk out, holding my cap in the air. I don't know if that's Tom Brady's style. Now, it could be now that he's in Tampa and he kind of likes to show off his personality a little bit more. But I don't know. I think that he's going to want to go out with probably a statement win of some sort, and then I feel like he'd want to walk into the sunset. Now, whether he can do that or not is going to be the question, because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously, they got Mike Evans coming back. Chris Godwin will be coming back off a torn ACL, but there's a lot of big questions, because not only is Tom Brady's legacy and career in the air, Rob Gronkowski's is as well.
Yeah, and I think that family is the biggest thing for Tom Brady. If Tom Brady were single and childless, Tom Brady would be playing for another 5 years.
Yeah.
But it's the same token that the exact reason I wouldn't be playing if I were Tom Brady is the same reason Rob Gronkowski originally retired. Well, that, and also so that he didn't have to go play for the Detroit Lions. But I think we're going to come up in a strange point in the league where we're about to see a lot of these guys, what their legacy really is. Part of the argument against Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't won enough rings. Tom Brady has. Tom Brady went to a new
City.
team, won another ring. Tom Brady had a bunch of guys around him who helped them win that ring. One of those guys being Rob Gronkowski, who now might have to play football without Tom Brady at the pro level for the first time in a 10 or 11-year career. Bill Belichick is now playing without Tom Brady and winning, but not to the extent that he did. And now New Orleans is without Sean Payton. I think the next year or two, there are going to be a lot of changes in the league, and it might not come immediately, but we're about to really be able to tell, like, where were these guys' heads at? What are these guys' legacy going to be? And how good were they really? Because we actually have something to compare it to now.
Yeah. I mean, I see the whole thing with Gronk, and I see him just tied to Brady. I think whatever Brady does, he will probably follow. I think if Brady continues to play and Gronk says, I want to hang it up, I think he'll hang it up. But as long as Brady's playing, I think he'll still be in it. But whenever Brady hangs it up, I think that he probably will do the same. I remember seeing a lot of people saying, oh, Rob Gronkowski could be linked to the Dolphins in free agency. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that he's going to end up doing it. I think that it's going to probably just stick where it is and then go from there.
Oh, I agree. And Rob Gronkowski, again, has way less ties to worry about. But another part of the reason with Tom Brady is Tampa wants him back.
Yes.
He likes Tampa. He is playing well. There is no reason why he couldn't return to Tampa. But I would not go anywhere else if I were him. Mm-hmm. So Rob Gronkowski, for that same token, why would I want to go start a new legacy on a new team at the tail end of my career and risk all this when my body's already been put on the line? I don't see a reason why it needs to go any further, unless you want to try to win another ring, but that's not a given. But that's Tom Brady. Tom Brady wants to. We'll see what happens the next few weeks, because Tom Brady might still be a New England Patriot if it weren't for Gisele Bündchen. Who knows?
Exactly.
We're about to really see her influence too.
Yeah, it's really going to have we saw a lot of it during his Man in the Arena documentary, talking about how him and Gisele really kind of talk about this. I mean, there's always the famous quote of her, I think, after one of the Giants Super Bowl losses, where she goes, my husband can't throw and catch the ball at the same time. So I mean, she's been very vocal, I think, as well. Obviously sometimes in the public eye. So I will be interested to see how that kind of works out as well. I know with you, one thing that kind of still with Rob Gronkowski that I know I've talked with you about this, when Gronk ended up coming back from retirement after Brady and just ends up leaving New England, that rubbed you the wrong way.
It did. He became a huge advocate when he retired of player safety and broke down in tears at one point, public speaking about the injuries that he'd sustained during his career. And I felt for him. He had a very successful career. The only knock you could have on Tom Brady not being the greatest tight end of all time is that if you want talent, you go with Tom Brady. Rob Gronkowski. If you want talent, you go with Rob Gronkowski. If you want consistency, you want the knowledge the guy's going to show up every week, you go with Tony Gonzalez. Mm-hmm. Rob Gronkowski otherwise was the best tight end, but he dealt with injuries and he retired because of it, or so we thought. And the fact that he then comes back, essentially ring chasing, talks about how he retired just to get out of going to Detroit, and now he's magically fine. I lost some respect for him when he did that, and I know nowhere near the whole story, but you were an advocate for player safety, and you talked about how much you were hurt, but it doesn't matter anymore now that Tom's back and there's an opening.
Yeah, no, and it kind of completely erases the whole thing with player safety, and it does make you kind of reevaluate him. I know with me with Gronk, I know a ton of New England fans are just like are basically just like, oh, Tom Brady, he's my favorite player ever. And I get that that's the consensus thing to do because that's who you grew up with. That's the main guy that ended up winning you those 6 rings during his time here. For me, Rob Gronkowski was always that guy, just because I mean, it wasn't something different. Plenty of guys liked Gronk as their favorite player, but I don't know. For me, I just liked like having a very aggressive kind of football player be my favorite player, and that was just kind of my whole thing when I was growing up. The other stuff in NFL news, which is obviously crazy. Uh, I don't know. There's a lot of speculation going on as to what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. Obviously, a main reason that I wanted to get you on the show. What are your thoughts on that game? I mean, they end up losing 13-10, and just the Packers had the lead for a very good portion of the game until it all came crashing down at the end. What was your reaction during that game, and then going on to now?
The Green Bay Packers looked like the Green Bay Packers in the frozen tundra for the first 6-7 minutes of that ball game.
Mhm.
It was 7-0. We were cruising, got a quick stop on defense, got the ball back, then we fumble, and after that, it just went stagnant.
Yeah.
And by no means did I think that San Francisco is just going to hand us a win. I thought there were many ways that we could lose that game. Out of everybody that we could have played, I did not want to play San Francisco. But what hurt was I did not see us losing in that fashion.
No.
I did not see a 10-point game. I did not see that at Lambeau. I did not see Jimmy G being a non-factor while the running game struggled and still losing.
Yeah.
I did see special teams coming back to hurt us, but I never would have imagined that the defense could play the way they did and we would be sitting at home in January.
Yeah, no, that's the thing too. I mean, special teams this year for you guys, unfortunately, has just been such a calamity. I mean, it's kind of just been all over the place with you guys. And I was hearing during the broadcast that it was something that you guys struggle with all year, and the fact that it's coming back to bite you now just is, unfortunately, that's just what the playoffs do. Any weakness that you usually have will come back to bite you, and you really can't get away with it. Teams are going to expose those weaknesses. And I don't know, you had the blocked field goal to end the half on, with Mason Crosby trying to make that kick. I mean, obviously people have their gripes about Crosby and his age at this point, but that's really not something you control there. But obviously you can try to prevent that. And then obviously the blocked punt was just ridiculous the way that kind of went. And from there, everything kind of just went sideways. One thing I had talked with you about was the idea that the Green Bay Packers could get away from Mo Drayton and end up hiring Joe Judge as their next special teams coach. And I think for a lot of people right now, Joe Judge is a sour name in a lot of people's mouths just because of the way he ran the New York Giants. And honestly, I'm with you. I think that he did a terrible job running that team. But when you look at Joe Judge and you see the way that he ran special teams with the New England Patriots during his time there, our special teams was elite. And obviously you can point a lot of that to the credit of Bill Belichick and probably what he's able to do, because I get that he's a very defensive and special teams minded coach. But when you look at what Joe Judge did there, and I would probably say New England special teams has kind of taken a bit of a step back in terms of things just because of how advanced they were when Judge was there. We rarely would have our punts blocked. We rarely had field goals blocked, and we were very sound all around. And I think for you guys, just bringing in a guy like that probably understands special teams probably better than most guys in the league, I think that would be probably the move that you guys need to make going forward.
Oh, yeah. And one of the biggest defenses of Mo Drayton that I've heard is, well, it was a rebuilding year. You got to give the special teams time to gel, Mo Drayton settle in. But there are two problems with that. One,
it's not a rebuilding.
This was our year. We didn't have time to settle in. But the bigger problem I have with saying it's his first year, they're rebuilding, give him some time, is that Mo Drayton isn't new. Mo Drayton is a product of the past two regimes. He was an assistant to the coordinator before him, and he was assistant to the coordinator before that. Mo Drayton has been part of the problem for years, and we've had a weak special teams for almost a decade. And to your point with Joe Judge, we've had a weak special teams for almost a decade. Meanwhile, the Patriots have had a fantastic special teams. They haven't crumbled when they've been in high-pressure playoff games. Stephen Gostkowski was a reliable kicker. throughout almost his entire tenure in New England. Matt Slater might be the best special teams player of the decade, maybe even the century.
Yeah.
And that all came under Joe Judge. It would be like night and day transitioning between Mo Drayton and Joe Judge, especially since traffic for Joe Judge in the hiring process might be a little bit slow because he got too powerful of a position too early. He can handle a special teams crew. He can't handle a full team, but we don't need him to. That's Matt LaFleur's job. And I think that next to anybody can do better than Mo Drayton. I think it's a travesty that Mo Drayton's key card still works today. But Joe Judge might very well be one of the best options on the table, and he is on the table.
Yeah, no, I'd have to say that he's the guy that you probably want to roll with just because, again, he's probably not getting a ton of phone calls right now. He's probably just sitting back and just being like, Bill get on the phone now. I want to really just go home. And I don't know. I think that would be a great option for you guys. And for anyone saying that it's a rebuilding year for you guys, I mean, last time I checked, Aaron Rodgers didn't think it was. I mean, he was posting Last Dance clips on his Instagram with Randall Cobb and with Devontae Adams. So I don't know where the idea of a rebuilding year. I understand on the special teams, but just in general, I feel like you want to have things all systems go. It's nothing should be rebuilding during a year you guys are trying to compete for a Super Bowl championship and achieving the number 1 seed in the NFC. Nothing should be considered a rebuild during that.
That's my other point. The special teams unit needed a rebuild. The problem was if it's a win it all or nothing this year, you don't have time for a rebuild. And it's especially worse because the coordinator can get some leeway. A new coordinator recovering from a terrible special teams year before deserves some leeway.
Yes.
Unless that new coordinator was a member of the previous regime.
Yeah.
Then it's been his fault for a while, and I don't understand why he was ever hired in the first place. No, and I've been saying that since the middle of the season.
No, I mean, Pat, I know one thing. If there's one thing about you as a Packer fan is that you are on like these guys that you don't think that they're doing your job. I mean, I think for like five seasons before he was fired, you were going to me and just being like, yeah, man, Dom Capers' defense, it's falling apart on us. We need to do something different. And then eventually, once it finally did get better, you guys started to, get some quality players and things did start to gel there. So, I mean, you are able to kind of point out certain things where you see stuff going south and it's like, all right, we gotta change course here. So I don't know what I kind of wonder next is then, I mean, obviously the kind of giant elephant in the room is what's going to be the huge deal with Aaron Rodgers. I know you were just talking about his deal with retirement, but I mean, do you think he's going to be back with the Packers next season? There was a lot of speculation, and it was like, all right, if he goes and wins a Super Bowl, you thought that there was a good chance he would walk away there and just say, all right, I'm going to go host Jeopardy. I basically proved all you guys wrong. I'm going to walk off into the sunset, middle fingers in the air, and kind of just do that thing. And honestly, I know you and me kind of have a funny dialogue about whether the NFL is rigged or not, but if it was, Aaron Rodgers playing like the villain arc and going out on top like that would be like the best. I feel like would be like the best possible storyline that you could have. And
I have no clue anymore. I would have thought had Aaron Rodgers lost in the playoffs, he would have had a better offensive performance. And let's get one thing clear right now. Aaron Rodgers did not play bad in that game. He didn't do enough. Yes. He did play his signature brand of turnover football. Mm-hmm. That's where the good qualities end. And when you score 10 points in your final game and outside of a running back and your top receiver, who you've been very vocal about loving, the receiving core collectively gets one reception on 6 yards. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard to not have a sour taste in your mouth. Which is part of why, much similar to Tom Brady, I don't know. I think he's going to need to think about it. I think there's a very real chance he does come back. Mm-hmm. He says that his relationship with Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy have improved. His relationship with Matt LaFleur has never been in doubt. So he's on speaking terms and very friendly terms with all of them. Everybody in the Packers organization wants him back. Mm-hmm. It's a very real possibility, but they're going to have to do some mathematical magic in order to have it happen. We're going to be almost $50 million over the cap. Rasul Douglas, our star cornerback, really should be the MVP of the NFL this year. He said that he would come back for basically what he made this year.
Wow.
We need a lot of that to happen if that were
We need a lot more shares of the Green Bay Packers to be
a
bought.
lot more shares of the Green Bay Packers to be able to run it back again.
Pat, I would love to call myself an owner of the Green Bay Packers just so that way I could complain to you and just say that, Pat, I'll buy 2 shares of the Packers just so that way I can say I have more authority of the team over you.
You basically have the same authority of the team over me because you have the authority. If I had any authority at all, I would like to think we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I'm starting to wonder, Aaron Rodgers could come back.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes to another team, we could get compensation for him. We would then have to play him. If he retires, we get nothing.
Yeah.
Legacy-wise, I would prefer either the first or the third option.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to wonder if the second option is the best way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Reason being, we're going to be so far over cap. We're going to need to cut some big names, such as Devontae Adams or Zadarius Smith. And once that window is closed, it's done. And I'm not a fan of teams tanking. But if we're going to lose a couple of key players and be missing the parts that we've missed for years that we finally had all together this year, we were all healthy. We had all the parts. We had Snow and Lambeau. We were ready to rock and roll, and it didn't come through. And I'm beginning to wonder if going all in and losing in the divisional round next year and pushing that rebuild off and digging ourselves in a bigger hole is a worse fate than blowing it up and getting something back for Aaron Rodgers right now and starting sooner.
Yeah.
Everybody in the Packers organization says that they want Rodgers to come back and keep winning, but obviously they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think in your heart of hearts you want that as well. Obviously, you want to see the guy that has done so much success and is still playing incredible football. I mean, I was saying to you, I thought that he probably should be the guy for MVP. I know Brady put up like a 4 touchdown game in week 18 now, and kind of like, and people were saying, oh, he now is like 45 touchdowns at 44 years old. I don't know. I mean, I thought that Aaron Rodgers probably could have, I think would be the guy for the MVP. So if you're playing MVP level football, at least I think that you at least have to come back. When I saw the game against the 49ers, it actually very much reminded me of Brady's last game in New England, of where it just didn't feel complete. And I remember just seeing us play against the Titans, and it wasn't like, if Tom Brady was going to leave the Patriots or just leave in general, I thought it was going to be like, all right, there's going to be some resilient way that he goes out. Maybe he doesn't come through in the end, but there are some, there's some like displays of like the Tom Brady that have been, a part of New England for so many years. And you didn't really see that. You saw a handoff to Julian Edelman for a touchdown, and Brady's last throw as a New England Patriot was a pick six to the Tennessee Titans. So I don't know. There were some similarities I saw there with Aaron Rodgers, and I think the possibility of him coming back is definitely on the table. I don't think that retirement is as prevalent as a lot of people think it is. I think that I feel like Rodgers would, I don't think say as much, but I feel like there would be a lot more, maybe quote unquote leaked stuff about Rodgers, walking away from football. Maybe there'd be maybe Jeopardy would, the Jeopardy Twitter would get a little bit active and you'd see some stuff going on there. But I don't know. I do think that the option of him going somewhere else is definitely a very high percentage chance. What are some favorites for you though? If he was to leave, where would you see him, possibly look at as a place to go?
Well, the place I would look at is whoever can give us the best prospects. Because the point I was trying to make was, of course, everybody wants Aaron Rodgers to stay if you're working in the Packers building. Your job is on the line if we start losing. So out of all the options, that's probably the worst one for Packers management to want. Yes. Jordan Love, very obviously, is not the quarterback of the future. We're going to need to find a new one. Mm-hmm. So who would be willing to take Aaron Rodgers? I'm not quite sure. The Saints might have been high on the list, but without Sean Payton coming back, I'm not so sure anymore. The Broncos have been on that list. Would Aaron Rodgers want to go to Denver? Who knows if they're a competing team right now?
Yeah, I mean, if Devontae Adams is part of a package deal with Rodgers, then I mean, because Devontae's a free agent, so if he goes anywhere that Rodgers goes, then it could be enticing to him if they kind of have a wink, wink kind of, oh, I'm going to do whatever you do kind of thing. So that Denver could be on the table. Is there there's no way that Green Bay is going to put Rodgers in free agency, right?
No.
Okay.
Aaron Rodgers is under contract for
Because
at
I heard
least
Pat
one more.
McAfee. Sorry, I was about to say, because I heard Pat McAfee talking today about, is free agency something you want to explore? Most likely that's him referring to next season. I'm assuming.
Yeah. So one possibility that Rodgers has now ruled out is he could retire this season if he wants to leave the Packers and the Packers don't trade him. He could retire for this season and then retire for 2023 when he would be a free agent. He said he will not do that.
Mm-hmm.
He is under contract for this year. So it is a matter of, is he going to retire or are we going to trade him if he decides that he doesn't want to come back to the organization?
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that on the table. And if he was to leave, there are some options that I was going to say I think could happen. And I think later on down the line, obviously, this is speculation for going on to next year. I mean, there have been talks about the Steelers as a potential team where I think Rodgers might want to go. I know that he's had a pretty solid relationship with Mike Tomlin down there. I think that I know that Tomlin speaks very highly of him. So that could be something that could be of interest. Depending on what Tom Brady does in Tampa, I think that could be a very interesting move too. So if Tom Brady's to walk away and Tampa has still a ton of weapons there, they still have Evans, Godwin, Leonard Fournette, and a ton of guys, all on that team, and a pretty solid defense to boot. And they're just a quarterback away. I don't see where they wouldn't, get on the phone to call Green Bay and say, how much do we need to pay you guys? Because they're essentially the Arizona Cardinals, but better at this point in their time. So I feel like there's nothing that they wouldn't do to try to get another winning quarterback in there. And I don't know. Another team that would be interesting, and you won't like this, but it's if Rodgers was to stick out Green Bay this year and then moving forward, I look at the Minnesota Vikings. Now, here's the reason why. I mean, I look at Minnesota and obviously have a ton of weapons. Thielen, Jay Jettis, you got Dalvin Cook in the backfield, and a defense that's building towards something as well. If in the next couple of years, if Minnesota decides to move on from Kirk Cousins because they don't see that it's working, and at this point it really doesn't look like it, I'd be interested to see, would Devontae follow him there? And for Rodgers, you're playing in a dome stadium, probably in your late 30s to 40s. You're in somewhere that, isn't that hospitable, but again, like pretty good area. And you're playing in a division that you can win, especially if Green Bay is like what you're saying, possibly going to then take a step back once Rodgers leaves. If you're playing in a division that you can win, that's, I think, something that could be interesting to him too.
I would be surprised if that were to happen, only because the Vikings seem to have picked their horse when they fired Mike Zimmer.
Yes.
I feel like Kirk Cousins is their quarterback of the future, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And Kirk Cousins is an underrated quarterback. He's put up fantastic stats in Minnesota.
I mean, he's underrated, and I will give you that. I think he's put up great stats there. Unfortunately, I just don't feel like the fit and what they want to get out of Kirk Cousins is what has happened there.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll see how Kirk Cousins melds with the new coach, too.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if he ends up in Minnesota. I wonder if he'll demand a trade and leave the options open. Mm-hmm. I really don't know. That's one that I think that's the least likely option, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him saying that he has an open relationship with Brian Gutekunst too is definitely something I think is very important, based on the fact that we saw at least what we thought their relationship was like, where these guys were kind of having standoffs with each other and not really talking. So for Rodgers to come out publicly and say, oh yeah, me and Brian Gutekunst are on good terms, is definitely something that would progress to him coming back. Now, I think Rodgers, he came out and he said that he doesn't want to go through a rebuild. So I think the Packers definitely going to have to move a ton of stuff around, and are definitely going to be kind of juggling a bunch of kind of different things. So there's a lot of things going on in Green Bay. I really do wonder what it's going to look like, but I don't know. Emotionally, what are your thoughts? Just like, final thoughts on this?
I wish we'd have won, and we wouldn't have to be having this conversation. I said before the postseason, Super Bowl was far from certain. Obviously, it didn't end up coming to fruition. But I would trade the next few years, as I think most football fans would. I would sit in the cellar in the next few seasons if it meant I could win a Super Bowl with Rodgers and he rides off in the sunset. I would prefer that over spending another year or two losing in the divisional round, getting nothing out of it, and just putting off and deepening our hole. That's what I think would happen if Rodgers stays. Hopefully he does stay and I'm proven wrong. But I think retirement might be the most likely option. We'll have to see, and hindsight's 2020, and you can only guess the two alternatives on what happens with the Packers. But unfortunately, I think that this is the year. It didn't happen. Everything was right, and I don't think we're going to have a better shot than this, at least not in the immediate future.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously going to be interesting to see what happens. I know, Pat McAfee, I was talking to you about him earlier, said that he's going to have a whole decision style thing for Rodgers whenever he does decide to do it. I think Rodgers is going to go out to Indy, and you were saying to me he's going to have maybe a hat of whatever team he'd go to, a Packers hat, and then a golf visor to kind of signify what his next step is going to be. I will be very interested and tuned into whenever that date is announced. You were saying that it'll probably be happening before, you had mentioned to me it'd probably happen before the franchise deadline for Devontae Adams. So a lot of different kind of moving pieces there. But the next topic in NFL news that I wanted to talk with you about was probably one of the best football games I've ever seen played, and that was the Bills-Chiefs divisional round game. It was the last game of this whole gambit of games happening. And I don't know. I was watching. I was like, all right, this is going to be this will be an interesting game. But I don't know. Is it going to live up to the hype of last year's game, where you saw Stephon Diggs standing on the sideline, hands on head, just in awe of the fact that the Chiefs were going to get the chance to go into the Super Bowl and they weren't. Literally a year to the day, or just shy of it. Literally, they face off again, and it was better than the first game where they played each other. I mean, it was back at least in the fourth quarter and those last 2 minutes and into overtime, it was back and forth the entire way. Josh Allen was looking like a man possessed, doing things where I know Josh Allen's a good athlete, but the stuff he was doing was freakish. And I was like, all right, this is absurd. And Pat Mahomes too, where I don't know, this past year, he hadn't looked exactly like, the Pat Mahomes that caught the league by storm in 2020, 2019-ish. And I was like, all right, I don't know how much further he's going to, progress and be like that guy. Obviously, I think he's going to be a very good quarterback, but it didn't look like it was going to be like, it looked like he was just going to have like kind of a stagnant year. Both of these guys were at the top of their games. It was an incredible game. Another guy too, Gabriel Davis, has 4 touchdowns for the Buffalo Bills. I know he cooked us a couple times this year as a Pats fan. So seeing him go off against the Chiefs was incredible. And I mean, all in all, it was one of the best games I've ever seen. What are your thoughts on that game?
The NFL has to fix their overtime rules. That game was too good to not give Josh Allen another chance. I mean, the game starts off, Bills touchdown. Chiefs respond. Okay. Average game, going high scoring, close, good. This is a fun game to watch. And all of a sudden, touchdown, game's over. No, because the other team scored a touchdown. Nope, but the Bills scored a touchdown again. Nope, but the Chiefs scored a touchdown. Nope, but the Bills scored a touchdown to tuck it away. But no, there's a field goal with 13 seconds left, and the Chiefs are going to overtime. And then they deliver in overtime. That was, I think I saw a stat that said 25 points within the last 2 minutes of the game of regular time.
Yes.
Is the highest of any NFL game in history. And it happened in a postseason game on prime time on Sunday night.
You can't get
There's not going to be another game in this postseason that tops it. The Super Bowl won't be that good.
No, it won't be that good. And I don't know. I'm not too big on changing the postseason rules. Now, I as a Pats fan, I know it's benefited me, a couple of times now at this point. But I don't know. I see the overtime rules, and I know that college is fun, and I like the rules there. But I think the NFL has already made adjustments to the overtime rules in the past. It used to be sudden death. You kick a field goal, you win. And it was like, all right, if you just get in range, you can put the game away. I think, they have a touchdown on there now, and it's that's what you have to get in order to, pull away and actually seal the deal. I don't know. I'd like to keep it in, and I think that the rules are fine. I mean, once you get to overtime, you're kind of in, you're past regulation. You're trying to, in effect, get the game over with at that point. But I don't know. I'd like to keep the overtime the way it is.
I think it's ridiculous. The comparison to baseball of if you go into an extra innings,
Mhm.
if in the top inning the visitor hits a home run, the game's over there. That
Mm.
would never happen because it's a ridiculous concept. And there's no reason that Josh Allen shouldn't have gotten an extra shot. And the answer could be, we'll play defense. That's fair. But if Josh Allen had gotten the ball first and scored, there's nothing Pat Mahomes could have done either.
Mhm.
And very likely the way the game was going was what would have happened. And think about how much better that game would be if we traded 3 more touchdowns in overtime. And that's the way I look at it too. Football and baseball both sit and well, the game's going too long. We need to end this overtime as quickly as we can. It's a 4-hour game. If somebody was going to get bored and stop watching, they would have done so already.
Mhm.
That game was straight up fireworks. It was fantastic. And the two alternatives are either, well, we scored and now the other team doesn't. And the game's over and there's 5 more minutes and then it's done. Or we score and then the other team scores. And then we have to do it all over again and somebody's got to score. And what fan wouldn't want to watch that?
No, I mean, listen, I'd like to watch that, but I don't know. I do see problems with the way the overtime probably is currently done, but I don't know. I see the Bills who technically had like the number 1 ranked defense in the league this year, and they end up going out and just not being able to compete. Listen, I get that you're gassed at a certain point, but I don't know. I feel like you still kind of need to put up an effort, and it didn't even look like they were doing that at the end.
No, but neither was the Chiefs defense.
Well, the Chiefs
And
defense
that's
is
my problem.
I mean, but the Chiefs defense is always terrible.
But it doesn't matter what teams it is. Josh Allen played out of his mind and didn't get a chance. It's a team sport, and you're not giving both teams a side of the ball to go out and try to win the game.
I don't know. I mean, listen, defense is still a part of the game of football, and I think that it should still be respected as such. I mean, I know obviously you could make the case of, oh well, if the opposing team was trying to drive down and it's a pick, then you could end the game on that. But I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It's something that I'm definitely torn on. And if you were to go to college rules, you can make a case for it. I'd like what would if you were to change the overtime rules, then what would your opinion of it be? Would you want to just see them play out the entire period, or would you like them to, go on and do something similar to college?
I do something similar to a hockey shootout.
Mm.
We do the coin flip. Chiefs win the coin flip. They get the ball. They drive down for a touchdown. Now the Bills get the ball back, and you need to score a touchdown to keep it going. Beyond that, it's sudden death.
Mm-hmm.
But each team should get at least 1 drive in overtime to get a shot.
Yeah. I honestly think that we're going to see some changes this offseason. I know this was a conversation that came up originally a couple years back when the Pats and Chiefs played, and Pat Mahomes never touched the field as a result of it. Matthew Slater got the coin toss right, and Brady went down and ended up scoring that very next drive. So I honestly feel that this offseason we are going to see some changes to the overtime rules. I mean, whether I'm a fan of it or not, I can just kind of see patterns and see the way it's going to go. I also recognize too that I think at every other level at this point, that's kind of what you do for overtime. You basically have kind of a shootout style. That's basically what college does at this point. So I think that is what you're going to end up seeing going forward.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
there are a million rules in the NFL that needs to change, but this is going to be the glaring one this offseason that gets looked at.
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be a glaring one that gets looked at in the offseason. The final thing at NFL news that I wanted to talk with you though about tonight is possibly. I mean, I know that the Green Bay Packers had a disappointing 1 seed, disappointing run as the 1 seed, but I don't know. I feel that the Tennessee Titans may actually be the worst number 1 seed in possibly NFL postseason history. They were a complete dud and completely fell apart when facing the Cincinnati Bengals. And I know that for a large part this year. There was a lot of parity around the league this year, and it's to the point where I really don't know who the consensus Super Bowl favorite is. Now, I know people were saying, oh, the Packers were the favorites, but now the Packers are out of it. And people look at the Chiefs and people looked at the Bills, and there's a lot of things going around. And this year, when I saw the Titans as the number 1, I really never took it seriously because I knew that they got off to a good start early, and it's just frankly that the start was just not as terrible as the other team starts. It wasn't that they were off to a good start. It's just that they were off to a not atrocious start, which all the other teams that were competing for titles basically were in. I know that there were like teams, I think the Pats, who were the number one seed at one point, had 4 losses like halfway through the season, which for many NFL teams, sometimes you're struggling to get into the playoffs at that point. You're, sometimes on the outside looking in. It's when you're looking at competitive teams that earlier in the season. So I don't know. I think they were kind of a dud. I think that Derrick Henry, unfortunately, wasn't able to save him. He really didn't look like himself, but man, Joe Burrow was just the man again. I hope that he goes on and ends up just winning the whole thing. I have no favorites, but I hope Joe Burrow just goes on and torches the league.
Joe Shiesty, baby.
Honestly.
I mean, the one thing in defense of the Titans you have to remember too is the Packers were the best team in the NFC.
Yes.
They were 13-3 through 16 weeks. They could take week 17 or 17 weeks. We could take week 18 off. But then we had a bunch of 12-5 teams that could have been 11-6 if they lost that last week. Yes. And we had records going all the way down. The AFC was just a bloodbath. Everybody was right there.
Yes.
We had teams in the final week getting eliminated, and everybody for the longest time was all within a game or two.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we saw in the AFC, it was just complete chaos that final week of the season. We saw the Colts get taken out of it. We saw the Steelers get in on basically a miracle. I mean, like the AFC bloodbath probably is the best way to describe it because no one knew who was going to get in that final week of the season, especially after the Jags ended up beating the Colts.
And with the NFC, the Packers were a good team.
Yes.
They laid a dud in the postseason, but they were a good team. The Buccaneers were a good team. The Rams were a good team. And then you had some lesser teams that got eliminated early. But in the AFC, it was a culmination of we don't have any great teams. We have a bunch of good teams.
Mm-hmm.
So might they be the worst one seed of all time? Possibly. They certainly play like it.
Yeah.
But they were also playing a dangerous Bengals team.
Mm-hmm.
That was an embodiment of the rest of the AFC, which is none of us are great, but we're all good. And if you can beat all the other good guys, you've earned that spot almost as much as a great team beating up on bad teams like the Packers did.
Yeah. The thing I wondered, though, I mean, I see this Bengals team and I'm seeing what they're doing. Do you think they're hitting their stride a little bit too early, though? I mean, listen, I think that they have a ton of talent, and I think that they could really be a team to reckon with a couple years down the line. Obviously, Joe Burrow has been amazing these past couple of weeks. T. Higgins, you got obviously Jamar Chase, and then Tyler Boyd making a amazing 3-headed monster of a receiving core, and they seem really solid. But I don't know, kind of like a Boston sports comparison. It kind of reminds me of the Boston Celtics in the late 2010s. Obviously, you got Jaylen Brown, you got Jason Tatum, who are still incredibly young today. They are still in their early 20s. So, but you see these guys, you see Jason Tatum at 19 years old go to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against LeBron James. And nowadays we're talking about whether they're going to even be in contention for the 4 seed in the playoffs. And it just seems like they hit their stride maybe a little too early and weren't able to deal with those failures. Is that something that concerns you with this Bengals team?
What really concerns me with this Bengals team is their head coach. I'm not a big Zach Taylor fan. I think he's holding them back. I think this generation of quarterbacks, we sat for years and had debates of who's the best quarterback, Brett Favre or Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. It soon will likely be, is it Pat Mahomes or is it Justin Herbert or is it Joe Burrow or is it Josh Allen? Mm-hmm. And Joe Burrow is firmly now setting himself up to be in that conversation.
Yes.
The difference is Pat Mahomes has a fantastic Hall of Fame coach in Andy Reid.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh Allen has a fantastic, underrated Coach of the Year worthy coach in Sean McDermott. Herbert and, in my opinion, Burrows don't have that luxury. And I think that's going to hold them back. Obviously, Burrow is still performing even with Zach Taylor.
Yeah.
But I don't like some of his play calls. I don't like his general attitude. And he did not have a track record before this year that helped. We'll see this week. I truly expect the Chiefs to win that might also be because they've been there before.
Mm-hmm. And that also
they hit
could
it
be
really early with.
And it also
They hit it
depends.
really early with
Sorry, go ahead.
Pat Mahomes in 2018, and they're still here. So that could very well be the Bengals. But who's to say? We need to see if Jamar Chase, how he plays now that everybody knows that he's a threat, how Joe Burrow plays now that he is a target on his back, and whether all these other guys continue to produce.
Yeah, I think Burrow's definitely going to step up in these next couple of years. I'm excited that Cincinnati is actually looking like a decent team for once. I mean, I know that they made playoff runs occasionally during my lifetime, but for the most part, they were kind of just in the basement of the league, was never making any rumbling. So to see them kind of look formidable for the first time since like the 80s is actually kind of an interesting thing to see. I don't know. I do worry about them hitting their stride early. I think that it could be a detriment to them, but I think that Joe Burrow, like you said, is, very mature and is going to possibly be able to, become one of those guys that is in that conversation of who's the best guy. Maybe not ever. I mean, obviously we have guys like Brady and Rodgers and we have the legacy, but obviously down the line, we could ask the questions of those guys. And at least he's going to be in the discussion of who's the best of this generation of quarterbacks. And I think that's definitely something that he's going to be a part of. With Zach Taylor, I kind of agree with you. It doesn't seem like he is going to necessarily be on the same page. And while Joe Burrow may not lose the game on this next Sunday, I think that Zach Taylor could. I think that he very well could have some play calls that just don't go the right way and end up costing them their season.
Zach Taylor almost did the same thing as the Chargers did in Week 18. Mm-hmm. Zach Burrow at the end of the game kept trying to run the ball in on a 4th and 1 and lucked out because of the penalty that was called.
Yeah.
And I saw him doing the same thing in the playoffs. He's my gut opinion is different than his, and I believe that it will come back to bite him at some point. Only time will tell. I'm rooting for the Bengals on this Sunday. We'll see if that comes out and rears its ugly head on Sunday or at any point in the next few years.
Yeah, no, honestly. The one thing I do like about Zach Taylor, though, and I will give him this, is he started a new tradition in Cincinnati. And I don't know if you've seen this, but apparently after, they're saying after every Bengals playoff game, and I'm just like, all right, so it's been 2. But after every Bengals playoff game, apparently he's gone to local bars in Cincinnati and he's giving out game balls to eat to like local bars, like around the area. He gave out 4 to, a couple bars like originally, and then he gave out another 4. And he said that this is going to be a new tradition that we end up doing. I do like that as a tradition, and getting the city kind of energized about a football team that probably hasn't been in forever. I mean, I know that they were very interested in their Cincinnati Bearcats, but to have them interested in a pro football team again is something I think is really nice.
Oh, I love that. And you can see it with Packers ownership in Green Bay, and you can see it with the fervor that's been around Pat Mahomes in Kansas City. These small market teams are the lifeline of the city.
Yeah.
Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow says there isn't much to do in Cincinnati. He is what's going on in Cincinnati. He can be Cincinnati if he really wants to be. And I think the Bengals are riding that wave. I think there's a very high potential that if they keep playing well, and it looks like they could, they could really have something special going on there and really connect with the city. And I love to see things like that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope that as a small market, though, they can keep it together and kind of do something similar to what KC is doing, where they're kind of on the smaller market side, but they've been able to have a pretty solid team for these past, I'd say 4, 5, 6 years now at this point. So I hope that they can hold it together for a good long time and maybe make a good couple playoff runs. I think that would be really good for the city, and I think really good for the league in general. Now, Pat, there is something I want to talk about outside of football, but I will get to that in just a second. The final thing in NFL news tonight was something that actually broke just today, and it is that is going to be that now former New Orleans Saints head coach Sean Payton is now stepping away from the team after 16 seasons. Obviously, Payton won a Super Bowl with the Saints, but was also tied in with some controversy during their Bounty Gate days. I mean, obviously, Sean Payton, incredible coach during his time in the league. It's going to be tough for the Saints to replace a guy like that. Pat, what are your thoughts on this?
I think out of all the coaches in the NFL right now, he's the most comparable to Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you want about his character, and there can be a lot to be said.
Yes.
He's just a smart coach. He's seen success. He's been a stalwart for New Orleans. And as much as Bounty Gate might tar his reputation, he did win a Super Bowl. He did make Drew Brees ascend to another level or help Drew Brees ascend to another level.
Mm-hmm.
He's helped New Orleans compete as Drew Brees got older and regressed, and then New Orleans ultimately played without him. And he was instrumental after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and helping that city come back from a huge disaster with a football team to boot. And he really helped turn that franchise around and rally that city. And another example of just exactly what could go on in Cincinnati, Sean Payton already did that in New Orleans. And he should never have to buy another beer in that city again. And I don't think he ever will.
I don't think he will either, but I do think that he is, while he may be retiring from football or stepping away from the game on the field, I have heard rumblings that he does have another position lined up. And I think this is actually something that you will like. So there were reports, I think just this past weekend, that Troy Aikman's going to be stepping away from Fox to go work at for Amazon Prime and go do their video broadcasts and do stuff with them. And I think they're saying that Sean Payton is a prime candidate to replace Troy Aikman and be on those Fox broadcasts. And I feel like that's something you definitely like, especially since Packers games are, constantly on Fox broadcasts. And I know for yourself, especially when the Packers are playing the Cowboys, it's insufferable for you. So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I can tell you living in New York, you got the division rival New York Giants, and they hate hearing them too. I love it. I had not heard the news about Troy Aikman. I would love that to be true. But again, this guy, say what you want about his character, is smart. He knows football. He's been able to win, and he's got championship pedigree. If he has some charisma to boot, he can be very effective.
Yeah, I think he could be effective too. I think he could provide a more, maybe not as hyper Tony Romo approach to the game, where Tony's going to be just scribbling on the screen at all times. And it's just like, look at me. I can do all this stuff. I think he can definitely break down a game similar to how Tony can, and maybe even do kind of what Tony was doing during his first couple of years, where he's predicting plays before they even happen. But I think it could be in a much more, I'd say, mature kind of approach, where it's just like kind of more laid back, and he's like, all right, man, listen, they're gonna run slants here, and they're gonna have one guy break out to the side, and I think it could be very interesting to see him in that kind of a role.
I think he could be exactly what Brett Favre should have been.
Mm-hmm.
You're a great Sunday night, Monday night guy, come on once a week, sprinkle a little bit of his knowledge in the game, and
Take off.
just take off and let people enjoy watching a football game.
Mm-hmm. I think he could be really good at it. I'm going to be excited to see if Fox does follow through and bring him on. I think that would be 100% the best decision for them to do ever. I mean, just Troy Aikman at this point, it's kind of whenever you're watching a Cowboys game, you might as well just get it. You might as well just turn on the local Cowboys radio at that point, because that's essentially what you're going to be getting. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But finally, Pat, before we do end up going, there was some news that I broke literally just during this show that I did want to cover for you. And it's actually an MLB news. I was not planning to talk MLB during this show, but it just came out that David Ortiz is going to be getting to the Hall of Fame first ballot. He received enough votes. I cannot be happier for David Ortiz at this point. What are your thoughts?
We talked about how Joe Burrow has the potential to become Cincy and how Sean Payton became New Orleans, but David Ortiz was Boston. David Ortiz was the man during the marathon. He was the man who broke the curse. He was just lovable the whole time, and he was always consistent. He had one of the greatest final seasons of any baseball player ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He made the DH a position, and he was, you want to talk about value, he was value, and there was never a doubt in my mind that he should be first ballot Hall of Fame.
Yeah. The DH was a kind of, I like the tradition of baseball, but I like what the DH brought to baseball, because I've mentioned on this show before, the AL and the NL they were two separate leagues essentially, and they had different umpires, they had different balls, they had different types of equipment, and the World Series was the culmination of seeing, all right, we've competed in our leagues, which one is actually the best league? And I think the DH kind of harkens back to the old days of baseball by showing, all right, we're going to be this league that has this kind of weird gimmick in the game, and the NL is going to have the pitcher bat. And when we face off, we're going to see really who's who. I like having that difference, and that's why I'm against the universal DH. But for large part, it was kind of just a gimmick to get more offense into the game on the AL. But for David Ortiz, he took it incredibly seriously, and he pioneered the position for himself, and I think many others like him. I mean,
And when he came up to the World Series, he performed.
yeah, I think in the 2013 World Series, he had like a 700 batting average. I think it was absolutely insane. I mean, I have so many great memories of David Ortiz, Pat. I remember being with you, I think, watching his 500th home run. We were in your house, and we're sitting around. I think we're in the living room with your dad, and we see David Ortiz get up, and we just see him hit it. And I remember we all just lost our minds collectively.
Well, and that's the best part about David Ortiz. You have a lot of these guys who are great, and they have some moments, and they have the stats to send them to Cooperstown.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean,
well, David Ortiz, you have the stats, you have the stature, and you have this moment and that moment. He hits 700 in a World Series, and that wasn't even his best playoff performance. No. It was the 04 LCS, but he also won another World Series and was instrumental in that. He hit a home run in 04 in the World Series. He almost won an MVP as a DH. I mean, he gave one of the most just exhilarating speeches outside of politics, inside of politics, in sports. I mean, he was anything and everything that he could be. He made sure he earned it, and it just paid off, and that's incredibly just.
100%. I mean, another great memory that I was able to have of David Ortiz, which is a really special one for me, and it was during my sophomore year in high school. It was 2016, obviously, and we were at Fenway Park with my dad and my brother. We were in the Red Sox were facing the Blue Jays, and I ended up getting to see in person the last home run that David Ortiz ever hit just in general in his MLB career. That's something that is really special to me. The fact that I got to see that last bit of history from him. Obviously, I wanted him to, I know we went into the postseason that year, and I remember watching the games, and I was like, all right, I can at least say I watched his last regular season home run of his career, but I was like, all right, if I want him to succeed, I want him to hit bombs in the postseason. But then when it was apparent that it wasn't going to happen, I was like, all right, I think I probably just watched the last home run Ortiz ever hit. And having that sink in is one of the craziest things I ever got to experience with David Ortiz. I know we talked about the 500th home run, but Pat, what's probably your favorite? We talked about the speech too, but what's your favorite David Ortiz moment?
I mean, it's got to be 04, but there was a game in 2016, and I don't remember. I think it was his 500th double.
Okay.
And then he hit a home run.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hit a walk-off triple in extra innings. You want to talk about athleticism. You watch Big Papi go run 270 feet to win a ball game. Oh, yeah, that's peak male athleticism. And it's just when you would go to Fenway Park and watch a Red Sox game, they'd announce the pitchers and people would get excited. And they would announce the lineup and people would get excited. And they would announce David Ortiz and people would just go berserk.
Yeah.
If that was the sign of what he meant to that team and that city and the sport of baseball in its entirety. You loved him or you hated him or you had an opinion on him and you loved the guy inside the uniform. And in that regard, he was a once-in-a-generation player.
And he was a once-in-a-generation player. I'm so glad he got into the Hall of Fame. But before we do go down to the wire, the other announcement that was big with the Hall of Fame announcements is that obviously Barry Bonds and Roger Clements are not getting into the Hall of Fame. They have been shut out in their final year of eligibility, effectively meaning that they will probably never get in. Barry, I'd say, Barry and Roger may have a shot maybe in 10 to 25 years time on a veterans committee, but at this point in their years of eligibility on the typical ballot, they did not get in. This is something that's, I think a lot of MLB fans are torn on. Obviously, a lot of people have seen the steroid allegations against those guys. Roger Clemens, I obviously did test positive and he has positive tests. Barry Bonds never, I believe, actually provided a positive test, but just by looking at him, you were able to make your own assumptions. Obviously, Ortiz had positive tests linked in the past, but those were a part of steroids that had not been banned by the league at that point, and there was a kind of some politics with that. But Pat, with this being said, with these guys being shut out of the league, what are your thoughts on these guys kind of not getting into Cooperstown? I know you're in favor of it, but with it now becoming official, how do you feel?
The same. I'll stand by it. I would not have voted for either of them.
But you would have voted for Ortiz,
understand.
just clarifying.
I would have voted for Ortiz. The MLB had since come out and said that it was a vitamin. It held up with his story. It wasn't illegal, and it wasn't the same thing.
Mhm.
It's like trying to compare the 2018 Red Sox to the 2017 Astros.
Yeah, which
It's
many
just
people
not
have done.
fun.
So many people have tried to do it, and I'm just like, it's not comparable. And I understand there were things that there probably was wrongdoing, but when you look at it in general, it's not even. I agree.
It's not comparable, and I understand the argument that you want the home run king to be in Cooperstown. You want the guy who's won the most Cy Youngs, the guy who won the most MVPs to be in Cooperstown, but Pete Rose isn't in Cooperstown. And Pete Rose did nothing wrong.
Which I think is criminal. I think it's criminal that Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame.
I do as well. Betting on your own team is way different than steroids. Betting on your own team isn't ethical, but it's not cheating.
Yeah.
Taking steroids is cheating. And if you let these guys in above and beyond everything else, what kind of message did that send? Especially in the wake of the Houston Astros scandal where the league did nothing and then that caused an uproar. What kind of message did that send to kids watching and idolizing these players of, well, if I stick a needle in my body and I cheat, I'm going to be rewarded for it. It's just not right. It's just not baseball. And I realize that it's a very controversial opinion, but I think that it was a justified ending.
Yeah, I mean,
seeing those guys get so close and missing it.
Yeah, I mean, I see guys though where it comes down to. I mean, I know with Bonds, he never provided a positive test. I know with the tremendous just growth that he had in general. Where do you stand with that though? Where Bonds never provided a positive test, there was nothing there. I know Clemens did. So what still makes you then go, all right, I'm still going to vote against Barry?
Barry had problems with Congress.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't exactly compliant.
Yeah.
And he didn't really work with anybody to provide a positive test, which, again, leads you to believe your own assumptions. But nobody's affected by whether you get into the Hall or not. He doesn't have any bonus writing on it. And he's not going to be eligible to play in an all-star game or not. It's purely based off of, do you think he deserves it? And if he's not complying and he's not cooperating and there's a reason to believe that he did cheat, that adds up to me that I'm not going to give you the highest honor. You are the home run king, fine. But I don't think you belong in Cooperstown if this culmination of events is what occurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough thing for me because I look at it all and I see just kind of how it all transpired. What I don't want this to become, though, is similar to a Pete Rose situation. Honestly, what I feel is going to happen, regardless of whether Manfred is the guy in charge or not. I honestly feel that they're going to keep Pete Rose out of the Hall of Fame until he dies, and then they probably will consider putting him in, which is criminal in the right. I mean, the man is I think in his 80s now. And the fact that I understand that what he did was scummy. I'm not saying that he probably wasn't a bad person when he was younger, but just I believe the man has repented, and I think the fact that he is still one of the best hitters, in the game of baseball, is still not allowed to, be relatively a part of the game. It is criminal, and I think that it's one of the things that haunts MLB to this day. I wonder how that's going to be with these guys too, where they're gone and then it's remembered. And the other part of it too is that I saw Jeff Passan come out and he ended up saying he wants Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame. And his argument is that the Baseball Hall of Fame is a museum. This is supposed to preserve the history of the game. ugly and all. I mean, there's plenty of ugly across baseball. You think of the segregation that was across the sport for many years until the color barrier was broken by Jackie Robinson in the 40s. You think of just all the craziness and just controversy that's happened over many years. Just recently, we had the Astros cheating scandal and a lot of ugly stuff that's happened, but it's a part of baseball. And there are things that people think that should be remembered and recognized as part of the history of the game. When it comes to that, then what are your thoughts when it comes to trying to recognize the history that these guys had?
I think that they could be in the Hall of Fame. They just shouldn't be enshrined in it. And then the difference to me comes in with, if we want to talk about Pete Rose, he's not in the Hall of Fame. We still recognize him as the hit king.
Yes.
We can still recognize Barry Bonds as the home run king. We still recognize the 2017 Astros as World Series champions. But we're not going to celebrate them.
Mm-hmm.
We can sit there and recognize the feat that occurred, but we don't need to celebrate the fact that they did it the way they did it. And we're not going to brush over it. We're not calling Hank Aaron the home run king. We're not calling the Los Angeles Dodgers the 2017 World Series champions. And we're not going to vacate the championship either.
No.
But we're not going to sit there and say that they won it by ethical means, that they deserve to be celebrated and awarded. That's the line I draw.
Mm-hmm.
Put them in, but don't enshrine them.
Yeah. I can understand that, but is putting them in just having is it just having like a not a plaque for them, but is it just having like an exhibit, or like what do you exactly have then when it's not enshrined?
People have to remember that the majority of the Baseball Hall of Fame, there is one room where they have all the plaques. Beyond that, it is a museum. We have a lot of exhibits, so they can be included in the exhibits without being put in the main room with all the plaques.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean that you definitely have a point there. I mean, there's a lot of obviously things that are going to happen within these next couple of years. I just hope it isn't something that they're trying to hold out until these guys unfortunately do pass away. I mean, it's just something that you kind of see at this point in time where I feel like that's where a lot of things go. And I'm hoping it's not that. I'm hoping that isn't what this becomes. I'm hoping that if it's a certain decision that you stick with it and that you don't cowardly try to do something once someone can't really have a say in it. That's the only thing for me. But obviously the main guy was hoping to get in first ballot, ended up getting in. So I have really no complaints there. I think he was polling around like 86 or something % the last time I checked. So the fact that he is going to get the call is probably one of the happier things that I'm going to see. But Pat, there was a ton of things that we were talked about tonight, but unfortunately, man, we are down to the wire, which means that we're going to wrap up what we spoke on and then, take off into the night. So first of all, Green Bay Packers owner and fan himself, Pat Edwards, joined us on the show tonight. Pat, great to have you on. It was amazing. It was amazing getting a chance to talk with you about everything across the NFL and the MLB, which kind of surprised me as well. But thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. I needed someone to vent because I didn't say anything during the game and it terrified my roommates. Yeah,
you were telling me about that it terrified them. And because typically during Packers games, I know you'll watch it, but actually, no, you don't. Do you still not watch the first half of Packers games?
Oh, I've begun watching the whole thing. Maybe that's the problem. But I tend to be very vocal, and I was not. 10 points, man.
10 points. It's nuts. But I do remember you had a tradition of where you wouldn't watch the first half of Packer games, and we made you watch the first half of a Packers game. It was Packers Colts, and you were literally begging us to change the channel. We were like, no, we're going to keep it on. And the Packers kick off to the Colts, and literally the Colts run it back on a kick return to open the game. And I remember you smacked me in the leg with a soda bottle. It just goes out of just pure anger. I was like, oh my God.
You shouldn't have made me watch it.
I mean, but hey, there is a chance that maybe if you just stop watching the first half of Packer games, things could go back and you guys could have a shot next year. So, hey, there is something there. But obviously, we did talk about the Packers. We talked about their loss to the San Francisco 49ers and the future of Aaron Rodgers. We also talked about the future of Tom Brady, him kind of now voicing rumors that he may be stepping away from football in a way. And he's voiced, and he's basically put out comments that we've never really seen before from Tom Brady. We also talked about Joe Burrow completely decimating the Tennessee Titans and kind of embarrassing them. Obviously, it was a close game, but, having them take out a number 1 seed like that is definitely impressive. And we also ended up talking about, we also talked about David Ortiz getting in the Hall of Fame, but then we also finally talked about Bills Chiefs and the incredible game that was. Obviously, an amazing weekend of divisional round games. I think that I don't know how the Super Bowl is going to be able to compete with something like that. I don't know how next week is going to, how next weekend's going to be able to compete. I don't even know how next season's going to be able to compete. So, I mean, it was an incredible series of games this weekend. I'm so excited for what's going to happen the rest of the NFL season though. But Pat, from Down to the Wire, I'm Brian Costa.
I'm Pat Edwards.
And we will see you guys next time. Take care. Thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out.